What's up, everybody? Here we go. This video I'm going to deal with is going to center around the psychosis of some New Yorkers. Okay? Now, what I discovered in all my years that I always believed that Puerto Ricans, by and large, are envious of Black people. Okay? And what I want to do in this video is highlight the 50s, and I'm going to move into the 60s to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So what you have here is a picture of two groups. And trust me, there were many others, but I'm just going to focus on these two groups for time's sake. Okay, so on the right, you have the Eternals. Let me read something about the Eternals. This was an all Puerto Rican doo-wop group, right? Okay, so the Eternals gained national recognition in the late 1950s, and their biggest hits were released in 1959. Okay, so here's another thing that they say. It's pretty clear that if you grew up in the South Bronx, no matter what you were, everybody danced to Latin music and everybody sang doo-wop. Both of those became part of the culture of the community. Okay, now doo-wop took off in the boroughs around the same time the Puerto Rican community was moving there in big numbers. The musical influence combined with the diverse culture of neighborhoods turned the Bronx into a vanguard for this rhythm and blues genre. So that was the music that was popping at the time in the Bronx. Okay. Now, in addition to the Eternals, there were other Puerto Rican groups that were important role in two other doo-wop groups, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, which is pictured on your left. They were known for their song, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And this featured two Puerto Rican members, Herman Santiago and Joe Negroni. And what's remarkable about this particular group, the group was initially founded by the two Puerto Ricans, but when one of the Puerto Ricans couldn't sing, one day they enlisted Frankie Lyman, and the rest is history. So, well, basically what I'm talking about, there's been a long line of groups that of Puerto Rican descent emulating Black people. So this has been an ongoing process since the 50s. So this other writer named Abraham Santiago, he writes Hispanic contributions to doo-wop, okay? And he says the contributions that Hispanics made to the vocal group harmony scene is widely underestimated and misunderstood. Okay, so he says in the early development of street corner sound, especially on the eastern coast of the United States during the 1950s, Hispanics played a primary role. The Puerto Ricans were the main vocalists found singing with Black and white ethnic groups. And he goes on to explain what groups they were involved with. Because of their unique position of being able to cross over, some were found in all white groups and identified as white. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? And what you call it? And some were associated with Black groups like Juan Gutierrez of the Diablos, and others were viewed as predominantly Latino, like the Eternals. Okay, so let me go back. Let me see what this else says. So basically, it also says they were in search of an urban sound that expressed an unusual mixture and fusion of cultural encounter in daily life in Jersey City, New York area. The a cappella era of the 1960s introduced these pioneers and preserved of the group's sound. What followed was the movement of records to capture the R&B group sound of the 1950s. The part that Hispanics played forming groups helped pave the way in building bridges of understanding between the races. This is one of the major collective contributions that Hispanics made, not only to the vocal group history, but also into rock and roll in general. So if you didn't understand what I was trying to say there, they're saying a major contribution was to bridge the racial gap. And what I find with Hispanics, they tend to over-exaggerate their relevance in certain areas to suggest that somehow your presence made it possible for Black music to make the transition into a national or white audience is amazing to me. But that's what he's trying to say. And the fact that some white Hispanics found it easy to sing with white groups shows you the ability from which they can operate. They could play both sides of the fence. So when it's advantageous to be white, they're white. If it's advantageous to be black, they're black. So when Fat Joe says all Puerto Ricans are black, that's why I don't buy it. Because being black is a lived experience. It's not based on your ancestry. And I cover that in my video, one of my first videos. I covered whether or not Puerto Ricans are truly black. So let me move on to, let me see here. Okay, so what happened was at the end of the 50s, the so-called British invasion happened. And that's when you had groups like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and other British groups took over American music. But what's interesting about that time, black music continued. We never stopped. Evidence of that, you had the Motown sound, you had the Philly sound, and you had the Memphis sound. We was continually making music, and that was the birth of R&B and funk music. Okay, let me get this thing up here. Now, but surprisingly, in New York City, in that particular area, a new musical genre emerged, which is called Latin soul, which combined Latin music with black music. So this was one of the first evidence of a 50-50 collaboration, as it were. Unlike what we hear with hip hop. Okay, so I'm going to play a little portion of this interview who's going to talk about the documentary, I Like It Like That. Let me, like I said, I always forget to turn on my speaker. Give me 1 second. Okay, now this is from an interview about the documentary called I Like It Like That, where you're going to talk about the emergence of this Latin soul genre. And also they refer to it as the Latin Boogaloo. And we're going to get into that more as well. Listen.
Latin music proper did not do that. African American music, as it were, could not do that. Latin Boogaloo included me. The younger generation adapted it as their own music. It was English lyrics with the Latin music of the culture.
That was a clip from the new documentary, We Like It Like That, which tells the story of Latin Boogaloo, a unique musical mix of R&B and Afro-Cuban rhythms that sprung from the streets of New York City in the 60s. Here to tell us more about it is the director, writer, and co-producer, Matthew Ramirez Warren. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you.
So good to have you here. So what got you interested in this unique period of Latin music?
I just felt like it was a really fascinating, untold New York story, and the music was just so good that somebody needed to do this before it was too late. While we could get these artists to tell their stories and bring this, wonderful experience, musical experience, cultural experience to light.
Absolutely. And I guess you didn't have to worry about the soundtrack to your film. I mean, it must have been hard cutting down some of the songs. I mean, they're so fantastic and so rhythmic. Just listening to it makes you want to get up and dance.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, of course, there's always licensing considerations to take into account.
Of course.
But yes, there was just such a wealth of great music to choose from.
Now, you interview some Latin music legends like Joe Bataan, Johnny Colon, Pete Rodriguez. What do these guys have to say about how this particular form of music came about?
Well, it was an expression of these young Latinos in New York City during the mid-late 60s that really represented them, that reflected their experiences growing up here in New York City, being exposed to Latin music from their families, culturally, but also listening to Motown, Doo-wop, soul music on the radio, which was the popular music at the time, and living side by side with their African-American neighbors.
So was this the first, then, uniquely American fusion of a Latin sound with American sounds?
I mean, there had been jazz that had influenced the mambo era prior, but this was really the first time where I would say American pop music, pop music in the sense as it's youth oriented, was mixed with Latin music. So it was the first Latin music that was really meant to appeal to the real younger audience, teenagers. Popular music.
Right, because it was English lyric.
So basically, this was the first 50-50 collaboration, unlike hip hop, where there's clearly not a 50-50. So now, Latin Boogaloo, I was born around the time when one of the great songs came out of that era. It was by Joe Cuba called Bang Bang. Now, I wondered whether that was a national phenomenon, but I later discovered it was more like a regional and more like a New York thing. Because when I checked the billboards from that period, none of the songs that came about during the Latin soul era appeared on the billboards. So it's basically a regional thing, So what happened was when this died out, it only lasted about maybe 3 to 4 years. And then it died out. And then when it died out, that's when salsa music exploded. Now, what made Latin soul interesting at the time, like the commentator said, it was English lyrics. So everyone could understand it. You didn't have to be Latino to appreciate the music. But then they went into a different direction in the 70s and they went full-blown salsa. And so they left everyone else behind and they just proceeded with the salsa thing. Okay? So that's what happened. But blacks always had their own music going anyway. We didn't need Latin Boogaloo or Latin soul, So I just wanted to point that out. Now, this gentleman right here, his name, he goes by the name Mr. Wiggles. I don't know his real name, but he's a Nuyorican, a famous choreographer, dancer. And when I tell you about how some Puerto Ricans tend to inflate things, he's going to demonstrate an example of that. Now, I'm going to play audio of a discussion he had apparently with some foreign, it appears to be Asian reporters. And this brother is going to give a history lesson about the Boogaloo. And what he does, he says the Boogaloo started in New York. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at Wikipedia, that's what it says. But that's not true. The Boogaloo started way before Latin Soul era, and it started either in the South or in Chicago. And I have evidence of that. And so let me play a little bit. Now you're going to hear, there's going to be periods. I might have to move it ahead because a lot of this video or audio is going to be kind of silent because he's doing demonstrations for the reporters, showing them what moves or what. So let me play Mr. Wiggles.
But Boogaloo is not from California. It's from New York. Oh, it's the Latin Boogaloo. Before salsa, it was the Boogaloo.
Now that's not true. What gave rise to salsa was the mambo, not the Boogaloo. Was the mambo. So I don't know where he's getting this information, but that's okay. Let's keep going.
A dance called the Boogaloo. When the Boogaloo traveled to California, it means get down, dance. Oakland used the word Boogaloo. New York used the word Boogaloo. Fresno used the word Boogaloo. James Brown used the word Boogaloo.
Now you heard, if you caught that, one of the reporters mentioned James Brown. He wasn't even going to mention James Brown. You know why he wasn't going to mention James Brown? Because 2 to 3 years early, before the so-called Latin Boogaloo emerged, James Brown was doing a demonstration on some kind of variety show about the Boogaloo. So let me play that a little bit for you guys.
happy? When he's happy? When he's happy. How about when he's sad? When he's sad?
Okay, so there you have it. He calls it the Boogaloo. This is 1964. Now, if the guy didn't mention the word James Brown or the name James Brown, he wouldn't even mention James Brown because he's trying to deceive these reporters and make you think that the Boogaloo comes from Latin or from Puerto Rican culture. But that's, he got caught on it, or at least I caught him on it. These foreign or these Asian interviewers, they don't know no better. They're going to go what Mr. Wiggles is saying. They don't know any better. But unfortunately for Mr. Wiggles, I know better. Okay, let me play a little bit more of Mr. Wiggles. And I might have to move this over because a lot of this, he's kind of just demonstrating certain moves.
Oakland did Boogaloo, it did not look like what Sam did when he did Boogaloo.
Когда в Окленде делали Boogaloo, это не то, что Сэм делал.
Let me move it over. Let me see. Get to the part where I want you guys to really listen to.
Техника от танца Сэма.
So the Sam, he's Latino.
Okay, here we go.
Но
Let me move it. Here we go. Let me start it right here.
как свой ход, как свой.
You don't have to dance Latino.
Oh yeah.
But in America, since Ricky Ricardo, since Sammy Davis Jr., he's Latino. Sammy Davis Jr., he's Puerto Rican. I know. Yeah. He's Latino.
Now look how desperate he is to try to demonstrate how influential Latinos are in American music and dance, right? He's going to mention Ricky Ricardo. Come on. And then he mentions Sammy Davis Jr. Oh, he's Latino. But he's unfair. Because why he's unfair? Because Sammy Davis Jr. was born in America to a black father, a Puerto Rican mother. He lived as an African American. He didn't even live with his mother. Let his mother explain, or let Sammy Davis explain what his upbringing was with his mother. And you hear for yourself. Let's get this. This is probably, let me play this, and it's probably in this.
Christmas gift of 2022.
Okay, let's go back. Let me go back here.
Great-grandmother.
Okay, let's start from here.
Sammy Davis Jr., it is a great pleasure for us to have you here on Good Day. I am sure that a lot of people have asked about the Will Maston Trio and your dad. I would be curious to start, if I may, to get you to reflect briefly on your mother, someone who I've not heard you talk about. What memories of her?
Very little, actually. My mother, which probably accounts for the fact that that you had not heard me talk about her. My mother and father separated when I was a kid. And he took me, she got my sister, and Ramona. And she raised my sister. I didn't meet my mother until I was something like 12 years old for the first time. And she was still in show business. She was working in Connie's Hot Chocolate. There was a show called Connie's Hot Chocolate. And they were on the road going one way. We were in vaudeville, the Will Maston Trio, Will Maston and his gang at the time. And that's another way they went. So we never saw each other. And every once in a while, and it wasn't until, I guess, after I came out of the Army, World War II, and my mother had quit show business. And she was a barmaid in Atlantic City, in a place called Little Belmont. Then I used to go up and visit her, and I got to know her then. She's a very, very gracious woman, very, very sensitive. My mother's Puerto Rican, and maiden name was Elvira Sanchez. My great-grandmother on my mother's side is still alive. She's 100.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. You get the point. He didn't know his mother. He had nothing to do with Latino culture. But this is the desperation on some Nuyoricans. Dr. Cologne does it all the time. Anybody that got any Puerto Rican ancestry, they were Puerto Rican. But doesn't acknowledge the fact that they were African American as well. This is what I mean by anti-black. This is a clear example what Mr. Wiggles is doing. Now, what I'm going to do to make this video short, I'm going to leave a link to the video so you can hear and see the whole thing, because a lot of it he's just demonstrating. So it's kind of, weird for you guys to listen to it while he's doing some demonstration. Okay, so now I'm going to play this Mills Brothers, let me see, this Mills Brothers video as well. Okay, now what's interesting about this Mills Brothers video, as you guys already know, that this was a major topic of discussion because of the breakdancing thing. But Mary, what's the name? Let me stop it here. Okay. One of Dr. Cologne's buddies, Adriana Caza, she posted this video saying that the girl in this video is trying to do salsa and she's not doing a good job. Now, the thing about that, salsa wasn't created until the late 40s, and it didn't come to America until the 50s. So this particular video is from the 30s. So whatever this woman was doing, she was doing what African American dancers were doing. It wasn't related to Puerto Rican or Latino culture, but that's what they always try to suggest. Mr. Wiggles suggested that. He said that mostly all of the dance steps that African Americans do is rooted in Latin music or Latin dance. This is the extent that these people go through to embellish their relevance. Let me just play this particular part of this video, and you'll see how she dances, and they try to equate that to Latin dance.
Look here, children. Now how come?
Let me move it a little bit more. Let's get closer to... excuse me, guys. Now, just watch the girl and how she dances. Okay, now Adriana Caza tried to suggest she was trying to do some salsa moves, but she wasn't good at doing it. This is the kind of nonsense that we're talking about. Had nothing to do with Latin dance. Let's be real. Let's be real. Black people are the most creative people on the planet. We do not need Puerto Ricans to teach us how to dance. We don't need that. We are very good at what we do. We're very creative people. So I don't understand why in the world would anybody suggest that somehow we needed them to somehow teach us how to dance. We're the most creative people on the planet. Let's do this. Mr. Wiggles. Let Mr. Wiggles. Here we go. So this is Fat Joe. He is the evolution of what we call the psychosis of embellishment. To try to suggest that hip hop is 50-50 merely because of your presence shows you that this is a psychotic group of people. Not everybody, not every Puerto Rican, just some Puerto Ricans. It's a psychosis. I don't understand what's going on. So basically, I just wanted to do this video just to point out that it's something wrong mentally to be so envious of a people that you're willing to try to steal their legacy. All right, so with that, if you think this information is valuable or you find it informative, drop me a comment. We could talk about it. I have a couple more videos on the horizon that I'm sure you're going to like. And some of them, one in particular, is going to go really deep into Puerto Rican and Latino culture and heritage. And I'm not sure they're going to like it. So, but you keep your eyes on that one. So until the next time, I'm out.